Rivet Games is a third-party developer that has been making add-ons for Train Sim World since 2020, but they have also earned a bad reputation amongst the player base due to the subpar quality of their add-ons. Generally, the quality is worse than Dovetail, and that's really saying something. Despite the overwhelming criticism from myself, the Train Guy 4, and other reviewers, Rivet has seen fit to not bother improving themselves and just maintain the status quo until the cows come home. There are a few Rivet products that I refuse to buy, and for the sake of my sanity, I'll only mention them briefly here because they don't deserve their own dedicated chapter. Those especially awful routes are West Cornwall Local, plus the Steam Rail Tour pack, S-Bahn Central Schweiz and the Bernina line. They all suffer from unbelievably stupid decisions on where to cut the route coverage, not to mention a very limited selection of poor quality rolling stock. And as for the Bernina line, that atrocious waste of the developer's time, money and minimal effort is not worth my time, so I'll move on to something else. In the case of the Steam Rail Tour pack, and why I hate it, it's ridiculous seeing 5593 Kolhapur and 45690 running in Cornwall because A. It's actually former Great Western Territory, B. You're only getting a couple of reskins for the LMS Jubilee 460 that we already have, and C. Neither Kolhapur nor Leander have ever run down to Cornwall in real life. I believe the only Jubilee that has ever gone to Cornwall was 45596 Bahamas, but she didn't go there until 2021. I've heard of poorly thought out and lazy cash grabs, but the West Cornwall Steam Rail Tour DLC really does take the piss. I suggest that you follow in my footsteps and avoid buying this rubbish. The main subject of this video will be my discussion of the Rivet products that I actually own in Train Sim World 4 and why I don't recommend them. Or, in the case of Island Line 2022, why I think it's actually decent. I must stress that this video is not a personal attack on the staff at Rivet Games, although some people may still perceive that to be the case, and I question their intelligence, or lack thereof. I'm sure that Rivet's crew is made up of nice enough people, it's just their products that are not up to par, quite literally in the case of West Cornwall Local. The introduction line on their Facebook page is, and I quote, "We are a modern studio developing the highest quality for simulation games." Well, if that's truly the case, where is the evidence to back up that pretentious claim? We're certainly not seeing it in the DLC. I should also clarify that I'm not trying to slaughter Rivet's reputation. Not only because they've already done that to themselves, but also because I give credit where credit is due, but only when it's due. And before anyone asks, yes, I am aware of the Engineering Express gameplay pack that was released on January 24. No, I will not be buying it, because, although it's about bloody time that we got additional liveries for the Class 66, I can tell that Ocean Network Express Magenta and Direct Rail Services Plain Blue were only chosen because it wouldn't have taken too much effort to alter the existing EWS model. They use the same light clusters and everything. And then there's the usual issue where the devs are charging too much money for not enough content. The pack costs £10, or 22 New Zealand dollars, at full price. That is the same as a Rosa aggregate, and you only get 2 liveries for a locomotive you've already got, plus a ballast wagon reused from West Cornwall Local, 5 scenarios for ScotRail Express, and almost nothing else. It's a fucking con! Also, since they've got a DRS license now, that presents an opportunity to bring the Class 57, Class 68, or Class 88 to TSW, so I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if these lazy developers don't bother running with such a good opportunity. Rivet's first add-on for TSW also happens to be the only German thing they've made for the game so far, although I dreaded to think how badly it would turn out if they made a full-on German route. This thing is the Deutsche Bahn BR204, a centre-cab diesel locomotive that, in my opinion, looks very bizarre. She's a variant of the Deutsche Reichsbahn V100 family, of which 1,145 examples were built between 1966 and 1985. 867 of these locomotives were designated as DR Class 110/0 and later rebuilt as BR-204s in the 1980s. I've always been confused over this design, as it threw me off when I realised that, despite the centre cab layout, this locomotive only has one prime mover in the bonnet ahead of the cab. And speaking of the cab, it's weirdly tall with the door located below the side windows. The BR-204 was released in April 2020 as an add-on for Main-Spessartbahn. That's the Aschaffenburg to Gemünden route, by the way. And this diesel allows access down part of the Maintalbahn to the non-electrified sidings at Aschaffenburg docks. But this add-on is still very underwhelming, largely due to the fact that she only adds an appalling 7 timetable mode services to Main-Spessartbahn. That's right, only 7. And what's even more annoying is that the BR-204 doesn't layer onto the Maintalbahn, unlike the BR-363 and Vossloh G6. This situation with the BR-204's limited services wouldn't be so bad if she had playable services on more than one route, but alas, she only has playable services on MSB. Go figure. Overall, the BR-204 is just mediocre. Apart from the driving experience, which is neither too easy nor too hard, there's nothing particularly special about this locomotive. The throttle has 6 power notches and looks like a steering wheel instead of a conventional lever, and I noticed that this thing has a digital speedometer instead of the usual gauge. I can't comment on whether or not the sounds and physics are accurate, because I barely know anything about the real BR-204, but I will say that she doesn't feel stupidly overpowered like the Swiss electric locomotive I'll be discussing later. To summarise my thoughts on the BR-204, I don't like her, but at the same time, I don't think she's god-awful. The first add-on released in the TSW2 era was Rivet's original Isle of Wight pack. This lot was released in October 2020, now costing 36 New Zealand dollars at full price, and it only includes the 8.5 mile long line from Ryde Pierhead to Shanklin. While, as far as I know, this is the shortest route in TSW, and the Isle of Wight Steam Railway is not included, what we've got is at least a complete end-to-end route, and you still get the bizarre experience of operating former London Underground 1938 tube stock in a mostly rural environment. I've just realised that both the shortest and longest TSW routes, that's Rivet's original Isle of Wight and Dovetail's Kassel to Würzburg, are very disappointing in their own unique ways. What are the odds of that happening? At the time of uploading, I'm not sure if I'll ever make a dedicated review of Kassel to Würzburg because of my general lack of interest in this route. I don't like this version of the route because of the Class 483's mediocre sounds, weird fictional advertising on board the train, unrealistically empty sidings at Ryde St John's Road, and the 483's livery not matching the time period of the route itself. If I recall correctly, Rivet surveyed the route in either 2019 or early 2020, but the 483 is supplied in Network Southeast colours. This was due to licensing issues with South Western Railway that prevented the inclusion of the pseudo-London Transport livery. The Arosa line had a good concept spoiled by bad execution. While it's good to see something as unique as a meter gauge line from Switzerland in TSW, it could have been done by any other developer and the end result probably would have been a damn sight better than what we got from Rivet. This add-on was released in March 2021 and features the GE 4/4 Mark II electric locomotive on the 26km long line from Chur to Arosa. The real line is famous for its steep and winding track, severe speed limits, spectacular mountain scenery, and the viaduct just round the corner from Langwies. The highest permitted speed on this line is only 35 km per hour, and the ruling grade is a brutal 1 in 16. and yet there is no rack rail to help the locomotives, who rely solely on conventional adhesion instead. Unfortunately, the Train Sim World version of the Arosa line is ruined by the severely limited motive power offering, as well as the awful distant scenery, especially where the trees on the distant mountains are concerned, reused and generally poor quality sounds on the one locomotive that you actually get, dodgy physics on said locomotive, and a completely lifeless street running section through the town of Kua. Rivet didn't exactly help the situation with the 2 gameplay packs they've released for this route so far. Heaven knows what would happen if they tried releasing a 3rd one. First, there was the RHB Anniversary Collection, released in December 2021 as kind of like a Christmas-themed add-on. That pack now costs 22 New Zealand dollars at full price, and you only get 5 reskins for the GE 4/4 Mark II plus a yellow observation coach. Not a good enough offering for that price. The second gameplay pack, called Arosa Aggregates, was even worse. This steaming pile of shite, in other words, this steaming pile of modern Disney films, was released in November 2023, and it costs the same amount of money as the RHB Anniversary Collection, but it only includes the FAC ballast wagon and 2 liveries for the GE 4/4 Mark II. The FAC ballast wagon being a long overdue addition to the game that should never have been omitted from the base route in the first place. What makes it even stupider is that Rivet got the colour on locomotive number 622 wrong. The carbines should be a more orangey red. I've made a video dedicated solely to ranting about this awful add-on, which I recommend checking out if you haven't seen it yet. Why are these payware reskin packs always so expensive? As proven by these 2 on the Arosa line, they should have been priced around 5 New Zealand dollars, or better yet, released as free updates. How do the developers, and by extension Focus Entertainment themselves, seriously expect the game to survive? They keep ripping people off with subpar products while the game and a developer's reputation is so shot to hell that it could give post-2020 Disney a run for their money, especially in Rivet's case. In October 2021, Rivet released a backdated version of their Class 483 model, now reverted back to her older condition as the London Underground 1938 tube stock. This was an add-on for the Bakerloo line, but I don't think they should have bothered making a backdated 483, for the simple reason that this thing looks completely out of place on a modern image route. The 1938 stock comes with its own timetable, which is essentially just Dovetail's original, and hideously unrealistic, Bakerloo line timetable with only the 38 stock running instead of the 1972 stock. The other option is to run a 4-car 38 stock set integrated into the updated Bakerloo timetable as a heritage train on a rail tour. Not helping the situation is the fact that the 1938 stock has a very bland driving experience. It's quite similar to the 1972 stock, albeit with separate throttle and brake levers. As for the add-on's quality overall, it's nothing special. I tried driving the 38 stock on the 1020 Queen's Park to Elephant and Castle service, and while the motor and track running sounds are much better than what I remember, I still think this is a bad add-on because of how out of place this train looks on a route set in the 21st century. In my opinion, Island Line 2022 is the only good product that Rivet Games have ever released. This thing first appeared in July 2022, less than 2 months before TSW3, and the add-on provides some welcome improvements to the otherwise lousy Isle of Wight route. The updated version is reasonably priced, only costing $24.79 NZD at full price, and that's cheaper than the TSW4 compatible version of the original Isle of Wight route with the Class 483. In the words of Brett Cooper, make it make sense. As a brief aside, I was watching Brett's livestream on January 27 and sent a super chat thanking her for being a big and positive influence on my TSW4 reviews. She actually read the message on stream, which I wasn't expecting, and that made my day. I wouldn't be surprised if mentioning Brett Cooper again starts a firestorm in some corners of the TSW community, but quite frankly, I don't care if it does or doesn't. We now return to your regularly scheduled program. The 2022 version depicts the Ryde to Shanklin route as it is today, following the major upgrades in 2021. These include a reinstated crossing loop at Brading, plus new signalling and raised platform heights for level boarding. Now you've got the bizarre site along Ryde Pier where one track is still in use while the other is abandoned. As such, Ryde Pier Head Station looks quite unusual with one platform abandoned while the other has been fully upgraded. As for improvements to the in-game add-on, one of them was the now accessible interiors of the ticket office at Smallbrook Junction and the restored signal box at Brading. I especially like going in the signal box, not only because the line diagram shows what the station layout looks like when the Bembridge branch was still open, but also because it offers a good spot to come and watch the trains go by. There is no variety in the motive power scene, but this is prototypical, for this one route at least. Speaking of motive power, this upgraded route includes the unusual Class 484 electric multiple unit, an electric variant of the Class 230. Both the 230 and 484 are extensive rebuilds of ex-London Underground D78 stock units. Due to licensing issues with SWR, again, Rivet had to make this ugly fictional livery for the Class 484, but there is a partial solution in the form of player-made recreations of the 484's real livery that you can download from the Creators Club. Although the Class 484 has stupidly overpowered physics, I still like driving this unit because of her strange nature as a rebuilt ex-Districts Line train, not to mention the fascinating history of the Isle of Wight's once extensive railway network. ScotRail Express was released in January 2023. The pack is far too expensive at a normal price of 57 New Zealand dollars, and it only includes the linear 47-mile-long route from Glasgow Queen Street to Edinburgh Waverley. I'm very disappointed in the lack of branch lines to Springburn, Falkirk Grahamston, Alloa, Dunblane, and Grangemouth Refinery. On the motive power scene, this route is made even worse because it only includes the Class 385 EMU, which makes the rail scene look incredibly unrealistic, and just about as predictable as the face of the Marvels or any other modern Disney releases. You also get a basic AI-only rendition of the Edinburgh trams, but this is comical because Rivet modelled the wrong type of tram for the service. In real life, the Edinburgh trams are actually CAF Airbus 3s, but in TSW, they look very similar to the Croydon Tramlinks Vario Barn units. As much as I like modern image commuter operations and the working announcements on the Class 385, I don't like the ScotRail Express add-on as a whole because of the route's boring and unremarkable terrain, severely limited service variation, and poor quality sounds on the Class 385, but you do at least get both the 3 and 4 car variants of this unit. Originally, the 385's throttle lever was annoyingly sluggish, but that has since been fixed and is much smoother now. There was also a ridiculous issue in which a section of missing overhead wires was clearly visible at the eastern end of Edinburgh Park Station, and of course that took a fair while to get fixed. It's all well and good to include little details like working lifts, bugs flying around station lights at night, and pianos played by an invisible Warren Zevon or Elton John when you click on them, but as far as I'm concerned, those were all just cases of putting lipstick on a pig. I think it's safe to say that Rivet Games has got a lot of work to do in order to A. rebuild their poor reputation, and B. win back a customer in me. I genuinely wanted to enjoy add-ons like the Arosa line and even ScotRail Express, and I'm tired of these add-ons nearly always turning out to be poorly made disappointments or outright failures. Unfortunately, that seems like the status quo these days, not just for Rivet, but also Dovetail. As far as I'm concerned, The only silver lining in the whole ordeal is the Island Line 2022 add-on. I strongly advise you to vote with your wallets, people. If, like me, you still have some hope in hell of Rivet Games changing their ways for the better, do not buy their products, as this will hopefully send the message that the greed and incompetence from these developers is unacceptable. Sometimes I wonder why I'm always so critical of Train Sim World 4, its developers and their products. I know that being as angry as Ryan Kinnell all the time is not good for my mental health, but at the same time, I'm passionate about this game, I still enjoy playing it, and I genuinely believe that it still has the potential to be outstanding. I'm just so sick and tired of Dovetail Games' despicable business practices that are nothing short of anti-consumer. Now, although I will be getting the upcoming Gospel Oak to Barking Riverside add-on, because I'm a fan of the London Overground and Class 710 EMU, that may be the last new TSW add-on I buy for a fair while. Underline may. While I still prefer modern image commuter routes, I'm bored of seeing DTG and third-party developers always going for such easy and service-level route choices like, for instance, Duisburg to Bochum, Grand Central to North White Plains, Manchester to Glossop and Hadfield, Bremen to Oldenburg, Glasgow Central to Edinburgh Waverley, and Gospel Oak to Barking Riverside. Do these people ever listen to what the players actually want? I'm tired of seeing so many stupidly short routes, with basic operating practices and little to no unique traits, that just keep holding the game back. And a DTG only making the Goblin is even more annoying for people who want a C2C route for TSW. I think it's stupid to only get Barking as part of an overground route, instead of the non-linear network out to Shoebury Ness with the Class 357 and Class 720. What DTG should have done for a London Overground route in TSW is Highbury and Islington to West Croydon, via the rebuilt East London line, complete with the Class 378 and branches going off to New Cross, Clapham Junction and Crystal Palace. That would have been a damn sight more interesting than a mostly boring 13-mile long route with a big swanky modern station at one end. What, making a route that's only 13 miles long? Are you fucking kidding me? To be fair, Gospel Oak to Barking Riverside is a better route choice than Romford to Upminster. You don't want to know how furious I would be if DTG only made Romford to Upminster, because that line isn't even 5 miles long. As time goes on, I've noticed that the vicious cycle just keeps repeating itself, and it goes like this. Dovetail, or a third-party developer, announces a new add-on. Then they overhype said DLC to the point where the idiotic fanboys paint their walls white again, and said fanboys try and fail hilariously to cancel anyone who dares to criticise the developers, often resorting to personal insults because they're incapable of forming intellectual constructive criticisms. Then the add-on is released, and it doesn't live up to the hype while being criminally overpriced and full of bugs that should never have ended up in the final product, as yet another victim of Dovetail's non-existent quality control and unreasonably intense release schedule. Then the fanboys lose their shit over critics again, while Dovetail almost never bothers to fix the issues that shouldn't have got out to players in the first place, and they just leave the previous add-on to rot while they announce yet another overpriced add-on. And then the whole ugly process starts all over again. This wouldn't be so infuriating if DTG hadn't been doing this scummy bullshit over and over again for more than 10 fucking years.